Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a world of soot, fog, and little boots splashing through puddles. Because tonight we're visiting Victorian childhood. You probably won't survive this one. Not because of danger, but because you'd be exhausted before breakfast. The kids of the 19th century weren't sitting around waiting for Wi-Fi. They were out there, trading rags for coins, dodging horse carts, and pretending cold cabbage counted as dinner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a dim London dawn, somewhere around 1845. The air smells like chimney smoke and yesterday's rain. You're maybe 8 years old, which in Victorian math means old enough to work, but too young to complain. You tug at your threadbare coat and step into the alley, where other kids are already shouting, hawking newspapers, or selling matches. Your first task? Find something to sell, beg, or barter before the constable chases you off. Street children were a fixture of Victorian cities. They went by names like mudlarks, crossing sweepers, or street Arabs, though nobody asked them where they actually slept. A mudlark might wade into the Thames, hunting for scraps of coal or bits of rope dropped from ships. A crossing sweeper kept the path clean for wealthier pedestrians, who sometimes tossed a copper coin in thanks. The rag and bone, kids rummaged through rubbish heaps, trading old buttons, bones, and fabric for a few pennies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the closest thing to self-employment they had. The streets were their school, their playground, and their workplace rolled into one. Historians still argue whether most of these children were true orphans or simply economic orphans. Kids whose parents were alive but couldn't afford to feed them. You might think of Dickens's Oliver Twist, but the reality was more complex. Some slept rough. Others returned each night to tiny lodgings where families packed 6 or 7 to a single room. Privacy was a rumor and comfort a luxury. The soundtrack of your morning would be clattering hooves, hawkers' cries, and the hiss of gas lamps dying in daylight. If you were lucky, you'd grab a crust of bread from a baker's back step. If not, you might sniff around Covent Garden at dusk, when the fruit sellers dumped bruised apples no one would buy. A child could survive on those. Barely. Yet it wasn't all despair, at least not every minute. There were little jokes among the street kids, swapping false names to trick kind ladies into giving double charity, or racing to see who could dart through traffic without losing a hat. Imagine a primitive version of parkour, minus the sneakers and plus horse manure. Every block held its own cast of characters. The flower girls, with their wilting violets tied in paper twists. The bootblacks crouched by doorsteps, their brushes clacking rhythmically. And the newsboys, always shouting headlines about distant wars or royal weddings they didn't understand. Sometimes they'd sleep standing up, heads nodding against brick walls, coins clutched tight in dirty fists. The police called them nuisances. Philanthropists called them the deserving poor. But you, if you were one of them, just called yourself busy. Because every minute spent idle meant a stomach that would growl louder that night. Still, the city could surprise you. Maybe one evening you stumble upon a Salvation Army soup line, or a passing missionary handing out bread with a hymn. Maybe you find a shiny button, practically treasure. The city's refuse was endless, and every tossed-away trinket could be repurposed. One quirky but true detail. Some kids made a living retrieving lost coins from sewer grates using sticky tar on string. The early form of urban fishing, if you like. It wasn't profitable, but it beat starving. And besides, there is a strange pride in knowing every alley, every market hour, every guard who turned a blind eye. But winter was the real enemy. With fog thick as soup and ice on the cobblestones, you'd see kids sleep curled beside bakeries just to catch a hint of heat from the ovens. Newspapers served as blankets, a Victorian life hack. And yet, they laughed, you would too. Because what else could you do? Some historians argue that this street ecosystem, grim as it was, built a sense of resilience. It taught kids to negotiate, to adapt, to hustle. Others say it simply broke them before adulthood began. The truth probably sits somewhere in between, like so many things in history. By nightfall, you might have earned a few pennies, enough to buy a slice of pie or rent a corner of a lodging house. The cheapest beds were just piles of straw in shared rooms, where the air was so stale you could taste it. A boy might snore beside a chimney sweep, a girl beside a washerwoman's child. If you got sick, you simply slept more. And if you didn't wake up, well, someone else would take your spot. But through the grime and the gray, there's a strange hum of life. You'd smell roasted chestnuts, hear fiddles from taverns, see flickers of lamplight reflecting on puddles. You'd see children skipping rope made from old rope strands, laughing between bouts of coughing. It wasn't joy in the modern sense, more like defiance dressed as laughter. So as you settle down now, listening to that faint hum of imagined horse hooves, think of them, the small night wanderers who kept the Victorian streets alive. Tomorrow, their world will expand. Factories, smoke, and the great machines that would claim their hours and hands. But for tonight, you're just a kid in ragged boots, drifting towards sleep in the heart of the empire. Morning again, though it's hard to tell. The air inside the factory is as dim as midnight. You rub your eyes and blink against the smoke that seeps through cracks in the roof. The hum of machinery never really stops. It only changes pitch when the foreman's boots echo across the floorboards. You've been here since dawn, though that could mean 6, 5, or even 4 a.m. Time bends when you're counting shifts instead of hours. You're one of the small ones. Lucky, they say, because your arms can slip beneath the looms or between the iron teeth of a spinning mule to clear the lint. Unlucky, though, when a sleeve catches or a belt snaps. It happens quickly, faster than you can shout. The machines don't pause for screams. Children filled factories across Victorian Britain. Cotton mills, match factories, and ironworks all needed tiny bodies and nimble fingers. A child could squeeze under the machinery adults couldn't reach. They earn a fraction of the adult wage, sometimes a penny a day, and that was enough incentive for desperate parents. Historians still argue whether families willingly sent their children or simply had no choice. For most, it was survival disguised as duty. You trudge between the looms, coughing as lint settles on your lips. It feels like breathing through wool. The older girls tie their hair up with rag strips so it won't get caught. You copy them clumsily. Every few minutes, someone yells when the thread breaks. It's your cue to run, fix it, get back before the overseer notices the delay. Your stomach growls. Breakfast was bread soaked in tea. No sugar, just warmth. The factory air turns sticky by noon, and sweat mixes with cotton dust until your skin prickles. Sometimes you imagine fresh air, rivers, or fields, though you've never really seen one. A joke passes among the kids. Maybe outside's just another factory with better windows. A curious fact, chimney sweeps, another breed of working child, often began even younger. Some are barely 6. They climb narrow flues with scraping brushes, their small frames the perfect tools for soot removal. The pay was meager, but the risk enormous. If you coughed too hard and fell, well, gravity did the rest. And because soot stuck to skin, sweeps were nicknamed black imps. You'd see them in London, grinning with missing teeth, half proud of the filth that proved their trade. There's a rumor that master sweeps would light straw below to encourage a stuck child to climb faster. Historians still debate how often it truly happened, but even one instance feels like too many. Parliament eventually passed laws to ban such practices, but enforcement moved slower than soot climbed chimneys. In the textile mills, you'd meet the piecers and scavengers. Piecers leaned over machines, twisting broken threads. Scavengers crawled beneath spinning frames, collecting loose cotton. The latter job was fatal if you mistimed your crawl. Accidents were common enough that some foreman kept a spare child waiting outside. There was no severance, just replacement. Still, there were rare perks. Some mills provided a spoon of oatmeal or milk at noon, a small mercy against hunger. On Sundays, work paused for church, though most children simply slept through the sermon, slumped beside parents who smelled of oil and exhaustion. Let's pause on one strange little detail: match factories. The phosphorus used to coat match heads caused something called phossy jaw, a kind of industrial curse where workers' jaws literally decayed. Imagine being 12, lighting matches all day, not realizing your teeth were glowing faintly in the dark. It sounds like folklore, but it wasn't. That faint green glow was real phosphorus reacting to moisture. The factories paid pennies, but they paid something, and for many, that was reason enough. The law eventually stepped in. The Factory Act of the 19th century set minimum working ages and limited hours, at least on paper. Inspectors existed, but they were few, and bribery was simpler than compliance. Even when laws banned night shifts for the youngest children, the rule was easy to bend. All a mill owner had to say was, "Oh, that one's 13. Birth certificates weren't exactly a thing you carried to work. You wipe your nose with your sleeve, glance at the clock that might be broken, and keep working. The noise is endless: clattering metal, hissing belts, and the foreman's bark cutting through it all. You learn to read lips instead of words. There's camaraderie, though. You nudge a friend, share a crust, whisper a joke about the boss's mustache when he's out of earshot. Laughter echoes oddly in a room that's supposed to be silent except for machines. When shift ends, your ears ring. Outside, the sky looks alien. Colors feel too bright, too open. You shuffle home, past factory walls still trembling with motion. The others walk beside you, not talking much. The youngest lag behind, half asleep on their feet. You pass a public house where grown men drink away wages you'll never earn, and you wonder if they were once like you. One of them might catch your eye, grin, and drop a coin in your palm. Maybe he remembers. Maybe he doesn't. But you feel the weight of it, heavier than any spool of cotton you lifted today. As you curl up later in that narrow bed, your ears still hum with phantom machinery. It's strange. You almost miss it. Silence feels unnatural. You stare at the ceiling, thinking of tomorrow, when the whistle blows again and your day begins before the sun even bothers to rise. And somewhere in that half-dreaming haze, you realize this. The factory doesn't just take your strength, it trains your rhythm like a metronome ticking inside your chest. Work, rest, repeat. Childhood in this world is just the smallest cog in the machine. You wake up in a different kind of noise tonight. No clattering machinery, no hawkers shouting outside your window. Just the heavy silence of the workhouse. It's so quiet, it almost hums. The kind of silence that presses down on you, reminding you that you're not free to leave whenever you please. The walls smell faintly of soap and boiled cabbage, and the air feels like it hasn't moved in days. You're one of hundreds here. Rows of iron beds, gray blankets, and faces that look older than they should. The workhouse is supposed to help the poor, but it feels more like a factory for sadness. The morning bell rings before dawn. You swing your legs out of bed, touching the cold stone floor. You line up with the others, tin bowl in hand, waiting for the ladle of watery porridge. It tastes like someone whispered oats over hot water and called it breakfast. No sugar, no milk, just fuel for another day. The Poor Law of 1834 created these workhouses, promising shelter for anyone who had nowhere else to go. Historians still argue whether the goal was charity or punishment. The idea was simple: make conditions inside so unpleasant that only the truly desperate would enter. And it worked. People said you'd only end up here if you'd lost everything: money, health, pride, or hope. Sometimes all four. You're separated from your parents at the gate. Men, women, and children live apart. Families aren't supposed to distract one another. You remember your mother's face for a few seconds before the door closes between you. The matron hands you a coarse uniform, still damp from the wash. It smells like someone else's life. The day begins with chores: scrubbing, mending, sweeping, sewing. You're part of an economy of invisible labor. The older kids scrub floors until their knuckles split. The younger ones pick oakum, untwisting old ropes so the fibers can be reused. It's slow, finger-stiffening work. The adults crush stones or break bones for fertilizer. The workhouse doesn't waste a thing, not even your energy. But you notice small rebellions. A wink from the boy, too, rows down when the matron isn't looking. A stolen crust passed hand to hand at supper. Someone scratching a secret mark into the wall by their bed. A tiny act of memory, proof they existed before this place. There's a chapel, too. You march in on Sundays, stiff collars itching, and sing hymns that echo against the high ceiling. You're supposed to feel grateful, but you mostly feel hungry. Religion here feels like a clock, something that must be wound up and observed before you can return to chores. You once overheard two older girls whisper that this place kills dreams faster than hunger does. It's a line that sticks with you. Maybe it's true. You're fed, clothed, and kept clean, but you're also erased, polished smooth like a pebble in a river. The masters and matrons mean well, some of them. Others just love order for its own sake. They inspect your bowl, your bed, your shoes, as if cleanliness equals virtue. You wonder if they sleep easy or thinking discipline can fix poverty. Every rule is a performance of morality. You can't laugh too loudly. You can't cry at night. You can't speak during meals. Even the spoons are counted before and after, as if you might swallow one for fun. One quirky historical tidbit: some workhouses had treadmill punishment, not the modern gym kind. This was a massive wheel you'd walk on for hours, turning nothing but air, producing no power, just labor for labor's sake. The idea was to make idleness unthinkable. Imagine walking uphill forever, never getting anywhere. You'd sleep standing up if you could. Sometimes charity visitors arrive, well-dressed men and women who hand out tracts about self-improvement. They smile tightly and pat your head. Clean souls make clean futures, they say. You nod, though you're not sure what it means. You've already been scrubbed raw enough to sparkle. At night, you dream of smells more than sights. Warm bread, chimney smoke, your mother's hair before the rain made it smell of wool. Dreams are safer than memories. They don't ache when you wake up. Historians still debate whether the workhouse truly helped the destitute or simply punished poverty with bureaucracy. It kept thousands alive, yes, but it also built walls between the deserving and the undeserving. To the officials, need had to be categorized, measured, and managed. But you can't measure hope. One afternoon, you're sent to the laundry. Steam fills the air, and your fingers prune from the hot water. You glance through a high window and catch a glimpse of the sky, a rare blue scrap of it. For a moment, you feel lighter, almost outside. Then a shout pulls you back to your bucket. Dinner is bread again. Always bread. You chew slowly, saving crumbs for later. You've learned to eat with strategy. And when you finally lie down, the sound of coughing fills the dormitory like rain on a roof. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone else mutters a joke about escaping. You close your eyes and imagine leaving. Not through the front door, but through time itself. Maybe one day you'll grow up and step out of this building a different person. Or maybe the walls will follow you wherever you go. As sleep drifts closer, the candlelight fades, and the room softens into shadows. The air still smells like soap, but you almost don't mind anymore. You've learned the secret of the workhouse. You survive not by strength, but by keeping some small piece of yourself untouchable, something that refuses to belong entirely to their rules. You wake before the bells again, but this time, the room isn't full of strangers. You're in a narrow attic, one floor above the kitchen of a respectable middle-class home. Your job is to make their lives quieter, cleaner, and smoother, without ever really being seen. You're a child servant now, one of the lucky ones, people say. But as you stretch your sore arms and tug on your apron, you start to wonder what lucky really means. The mattress beneath you feels like it's stuffed with old hay, and the blanket is thin enough to see candlelight through. You sit up, careful not to bump your head on the slanted ceiling. A spider web in the corner trembles as a carriage rattles past outside. Somewhere below, the cook is already awake. You can hear the scrape of her shoes on the kitchen flagstones, the clatter of pots beginning their morning chorus. Your day begins before dawn and ends when everyone else has long fallen asleep. You sweep, dust, fetch water, polish brass, and help the cook prepare endless meals you'll never taste properly. You move like a ghost through hallways, stepping lightly so the family doesn't hear your presence. The rule is simple. If they remember you exist, you're probably doing something wrong. Historians still argue about how many child servants there were in Victorian Britain, but it was one of the most common forms of employment for poor children, especially girls. Sometimes families sent their kids away to wealthier households in exchange for room, board, and a vague promise of moral education. It sounds like opportunity on paper, but in practice, it was servitude wrapped in politeness. You spend your morning polishing silver spoons, so bright you can see your reflection, though it's hard to recognize the person staring back. A little soot on your cheek, hair tied tight, eyes half-lidded from sleep. You're meant to be invisible, but in that shining surface, you can't help but see yourself. The mistress of the house descends the stairs, perfume arriving before her. She glances at you without speaking, adjusts the ribbon on her dress, and steps into the parlor. You curtsy out of habit, too low, maybe because your knees crack and she doesn't notice. That's fine. The best compliment a servant can get is silence. Sometimes you imagine what it must be like to be her, to wake when you want, eat without scrubbing afterward, to have gloves so white they never meet dirt. You smile at the thought, then shake your head quickly before the cook catches you daydreaming. The kitchen is your world. The air smells of boiling cabbage, coal smoke, and soap. You keep a small corner by the stove where you hide bits of bread. Not stealing, just saving for later. A maid's appetite has to fit between chores. Every so often, a footman or older servant might sneak you a story. Tall tales of the master's younger days, or ghost stories about former maids who never left the house. The walls creak enough to make you half believe them. One older housekeeper tells you that ghosts linger because they still have work left undone. You nod, pretending to laugh, but secretly you wonder. If that's true, no servant could ever rest. One curious historical tidbit. Victorian employers often made their servants wear livery, uniforms that were meant to symbolize loyalty and cleanliness, but really just marked social distance. Some even required their staff to face the wall when masters passed by to avoid the awkwardness of eye contact. The philosophy was simple. The best servant was a silent one. Your tasks grow stranger as the day unfolds. You carry hot water upstairs for baths you'll never take. You dust the piano you're not allowed to touch. You iron shirts that belong to people who don't remember your name. When you finally sit for a few minutes at noon, your hands tremble slightly from the effort. But there are soft moments too. The younger children of the house, curious and half rebellious, sometimes talk to you when no one's watching. One of them gives you a broken toy horse. It's one missing. You can fix it, he says proudly. You tuck it into your apron pocket like treasure. Evening brings the longest stretch. Candles to trim, boots to clean, stairs to scrub one last time before lights out. You listen through the floorboards as the family laughs over dinner. You recognize the smell of roast beef, rich, savory, and your stomach twists with envy. But you smile anyway, because the laughter upstairs means the house is calm, and calm means no one's angry. The head housemaid checks your work with a lantern, nods once, and dismisses you. You climb the narrow stairs to your attic, muscles trembling. You pass the other servants' quarters, small, quiet, each holding a life compressed into a few square feet. Someone hums softly in another room, a tune that might be a lullaby or a hymn. Historians still debate whether service offered real social mobility. A few children rose through the ranks, from maid to housekeeper, from errand boy to butler. But most stayed exactly where they began, just older with stiffer hands. Yet the Victorians loved to tell stories of the grateful servant, the one who loved their masters so dearly they forgot their own needs. You suspect those stories were written by people who never scrubbed a floor. Before sleep, you take out the toy horse again, running your thumb over the chipped paint. You whisper a name to it, something simple, private. Then you hide it under your pillow. It's the only thing in this house that belongs entirely to you. The candle burns low, and shadows stretch like long fingers across the ceiling. Somewhere below, the city sighs, carriage wheels, a distant bell, footsteps fading into fog. You close your eyes, bones aching, but your mind drifts to the open streets, to laughter that isn't hushed. And though you know morning will come too soon, for now, you let yourself dream of freedom, even if it's only the kind found in sleep. The attic fades, and when you open your eyes again, you're sitting in a small wooden desk, legs cramped beneath it, slate and chalk before you. A teacher's cane rests ominously on the table at the front, gleaming faintly in the morning light. You're at school, or what passes for one in the Victorian world. The kind of place that smells faintly of ink, wool, and damp shoes. School, they said, would be the great equalizer. But for most Victorian children, education was just another form of discipline, another way to remind you of your place. You don't pay for it, true, but you pay in patience, in silence, and in bruised knuckles when you forget your sums. The room holds 50 children, maybe more, packed shoulder to shoulder. You can hear the scratch of chalk like insects crawling across the walls. The teacher, stern, waistcoat too tight, paces slowly down the aisles, eyes sharp as pins. You freeze when he passes behind you, holding your breath so you don't cough and draw attention. Historians still argue about how effective these early schools really were. Some say they brought literacy to millions. Others say they simply trained obedience. Both might be true. You learn your letters, yes, but mostly you learn to sit still, to keep quiet, and to obey the rhythm of the bell. The air smells of ink and nervous sweat. The windows fog up with breath, and the light filtering through looks tired already. You write your name on the slate, each letter wobbling a little. You practice until your fingers ache. When you make a mistake, the teacher taps your knuckles with a cane. Not too hard, just enough to remind you he's watching. Discipline is an art here. The rules are written on the wall. Be punctual. Be clean. Be respectful. You could add be silent, but that one doesn't need to be written. It's everywhere in the way you sit, in the way you fold your hands, in the way you don't dare to laugh unless the teacher does first. Still, there's a strange comfort in routine. You know when to stand, when to pray, when to sing the morning hymn in shaky unison. You even start to enjoy the sound of chalk squeaking. It means someone else is being scolded instead of you. And then there's Sunday school, where the lessons turn from arithmetic to morality. The stories are familiar. Daniel in the lion's den, David and Goliath, the prodigal son. But the tone is always the same. Be humble, be patient, and remember your betters know best. You're taught that good children are like candles, bright, still, and easily snuffed out if they misbehave. One quirky tidbit. Some teachers made students wear dunce caps, cone-shaped hats labeled dunce for mistakes as simple as misspelling a word. It sounds funny now, but in a crowded room, humiliation was the sharpest tool of all. Some scholars say it worked. Others say it only taught shame. Either way, it certainly kept things quiet. You notice something about your classmates. Some come in with clean faces and ribbon collars. Others with bare feet and patch sleeves. The teacher pretends not to see the difference, but everyone does. The rich children go home early for lunch. The rest of you stay, gnawing on crust from your pockets. By afternoon, the light fades, but lessons drag on. Geography, history, scripture. You trace maps of the British Empire, India, Africa, the West Indies, colored pink to show how far the Queen's rule stretches. You wonder if children there sit in classrooms too, memorizing your world in return. Sometimes the teacher softens. Maybe he tells a story from his own boyhood, or reads aloud from a book like Treasure Island or A Christmas Carol. For a few minutes, the room breathes again. You can almost taste the sea salt from the story's ships, or smell the pudding from Scrooge's feast. You forget the cane, the chalk dust, the hunger gnawing under your ribs. But moments like that pass quickly. By the time the final bell rings, you're stiff, hungry, and blinking at the fading sky. The others shuffle out, laughing softly, already forgetting half the lessons they learned. You linger for a moment, staring at the map on the wall. It looks so large, the world, so full of places you'll never see. Historians still debate whether these schools offer hope or simply train children for factory life. The truth, as always, lives somewhere in the middle. For many, school was the first taste of structure and safety. For others, it was just another form of labor, mental instead of physical. You tuck your slate into a bag made from an old flour sack and start the long walk home. The cobblestones are slick with rain, and the street lamps blink awake one by one. You pass a baker's window, fogged with steam, And for a moment you imagine walking in, buying a bun, and sitting somewhere warm to eat it. But you keep walking. You glance up at the chimneys, their smoke curling against the dusk, and think of all the other children across the city, some sweeping, some stitching, some sleeping already after a long day. You all share the same sky, though you rarely see it. As you reach your doorway, the church bell tolls the hour. You pause, listening. Somewhere far away, another bell echoes back. A teacher's bell, a factory whistle, maybe even a workhouse gong. You smile faintly at the thought that all of them sound the same, no matter where you are. Then you step inside, set down your slate, and stretch your fingers sore from writing. Tomorrow will come again, and with it another set of lessons, another day of lines and rules and chalk dust. But tonight, you let your eyes close, imagining a world where learning feels like freedom instead of obligation. Morning drips into afternoon, and by now you've earned a few stolen hours away from slates and sermons. You're out in the street again, though not for work this time. The air is surprisingly bright. London sunlight, thin but determined, bouncing off puddles and glass shop fronts. You're a Victorian child at play, though that word, play, doesn't quite mean what it does today. Here, fun is what you build yourself. You don't have toy aisles or plastic packaging. You've got scraps of cloth, wooden spools, marbles made of clay, and maybe, if you're lucky, a hoop from a broken barrel to roll along the curb. The street is your playground, and you make do with whatever falls into your path. You and a few others crowd around a small space between buildings where the mud has dried into an uneven field. Someone draws lines with chalk. The game might be knucklebones today, throwing and catching tiny bones or pebbles in practiced rhythm. Or maybe hoop trundling, chasing that precious circle of metal down the street like a tiny wheel of fortune. A horse-drawn carriage rattles past, and everyone jumps aside. One boy, barefoot, laughing, slaps the horse's flank as it passes, then disappears into the alley before the driver can shout. You all burst into laughter, half from mischief, half from relief. Historians still argue whether Victorian children played freely or under watchful adult eyes. The answer, of course, depends on your class. Middle-class children played indoors, under the gentle supervision of nannies, with dolls that blinked and miniature tea sets made of porcelain. You've got mud for tea and string for dolls, and your games end when the lamplighter comes by. Still, there's a certain freedom here. You can run without permission, laugh without a score, make rules that exist only until someone cheats. You can pretend the world is bigger than these streets. Across town, in a grander square, another child winds up a tin toy, a soldier that walks stiffly forward before falling onto its face. Its price equals a week's wages for your father, but it breaks just as easily. There's a quiet equality in that, though you don't know it yet. For you, the best toys are the ones that feel alive. A spinning top made from an apple core and a stick. A skipping rope twisted from laundry line. A paper boat sailing briefly in a puddle before sinking with ceremony. There's a quirky fact about these times. Toy makers in the late 1800s started experimenting with cheap mass production, flooding markets with penny toys. Tiny lead soldiers, tin horses, and even miniature locomotives, all sold for 1 copper penny. For a brief, magical decade, even poor children could own a toy fresh from a factory. But those toys didn't last. They rusted, broke, or were sold again for food money. Still, the memory of them, how it felt to own something shiny, something that moved, lingered like a tiny spark. When rain starts, no one runs for shelter. Instead, the cobbled street becomes a stage. You and your friends float matchsticks down the gutters, racing them to the drains. The losers shout accusations of cheating. The winners pretend to be magnanimous princes of Puddleland. And then, in quieter moments, there's imagination itself, the cheapest and richest toy of all. You find an old broom handle, and it becomes a musket. A broken hat turns into a pirate's crown. The shadows of chimney smoke twist into dragons if you stare long enough. Historians still argue whether this imaginative play was rebellion or resilience. Some say it was just escapism, others that it was training for creativity in a changing world. Either way, when you play, you feel powerful. For an hour or two, no one tells you where to stand or what to learn. Even indoors, there's a rhythm to recreation. On Sundays, if you're lucky, you sit near the hearth while someone reads aloud. Perhaps Dickens, perhaps a local newspaper story about a faraway war. You listen, wide-eyed, to tales of children who become heroes, orphans who outsmart cruel adults. Sometimes you laugh at the idea that a poor child could rise so high. Other times, you wonder if that's exactly what stories are for. You remember, faintly, hearing about Punch and Judy shows, the traveling puppet acts performed at fairs and beaches. They're raucous, a little violent, and always the same. Mr. Punch bashes someone with a stick, the audience laughs, and children squeal with delight. It's the kind of humor that teaches survival. Laugh before the world laughs at you. There's one joke you make often. When someone trips, you call them the Queen's footman. It doesn't make much sense, but it always gets a laugh. Humor, you realize, is its own kind of toy. Even the seasons shape your play. Winter brings ice skating on frozen canals. Dangerous but irresistible. Spring brings marbles or alleys, rolled through chalk circles drawn on flagstones. Summer means fairs, crowded, noisy, dazzling. You might sneak in behind the tents, watch jugglers, smell roasted chestnuts, and listen to the carousel's wheezing tune until someone shoos you away. And when autumn comes, you gather conkers from horse chestnut trees. You thread them with string, swing, and smash them together to see who survives the most hits. Victorians took this game so seriously that there were rumors of conquer champions. Men who swore their nuts were hardened with vinegar and secrecy. You might not have much, but you have moments like this, tiny, fierce joys carved from nothing. The day ends with dirty knees and a bruised shin, but you don't mind. You walk home grinning, a conker in your pocket, a story in your head. Your mother scolds you for the mud, but even she hides a smile. Later, lying on your straw mattress, you hear other children outside still playing under the lamplight. Their laughter floats through the window, and for once, you don't envy them. You're already somewhere better, in your imagination, halfway between the world you know and the one you wish existed. You think of tomorrow's chores, the factory whistles, the endless lessons. But for now, they can wait. The world is wide in your dreams, and you've got the whole night to play. Morning again, and it's cold enough that your breath comes out in clouds. You stare at the clothes hanging by the hearth, damp, wrinkled, and smelling faintly of soot. You've got exactly 2 outfits, one for best, which means Sunday or maybe a funeral, and one for everything else. Guess which one you're wearing today. The wool scratches your skin, the seams dig at your shoulders, and the shirt's so stiff with old soap that it could practically stand up on its own. You tug it over your head anyway, because this is what being dressed means in the Victorian world. Covering yourself from neck to ankle, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. Victorian children's clothing was supposed to look proper, not pleasant. Society believed that modesty was moral, and morality was visible in fabric. Long sleeves for girls, waistcoats for boys, and boots, if you were lucky enough to own a pair, that were heavy enough to double as weights in a windstorm. You sit down to lace yours. They're too big. Hand-me-downs from an older cousin whose feet grew faster than yours. There's a hole near the toe that you've learned to hide with mud. Some mornings, you tie rags around your feet before sliding them in. It's not elegant, but keeps your toes. Historians still argue whether children's clothing in the 1800s was designed more for show or practicality. The truth, like most things Victorian, depends on your income. The rich had wardrobes that told stories of progress. Cotton imported from colonies, lace made by machines, ribbons dyed in shades newly invented by chemists. The poor had stories too, just written in patches and threadbare cuffs. Still, there's a strange sort of pride in mending your own clothes. You've watched your mother darn socks by candlelight, her fingers moving faster than her eyes. She threads each needle like a promise, muttering that fabric never goes to waste. And she's right. You've worn the same trousers so long they feel like a second skin, torn and mended until the stitching is more you than the cloth itself. If you were born into comfort, you'd be corseted or collared. Wealthy children were mini adults, girls squeezed into lace-trimmed gowns, boys in sailor suits with gold buttons. It sounds charming until you realize how hard it is to breathe in a whalebone corset or to run while your collar cuts into your neck. Fashion, after all, didn't care whether you could move, only that you looked respectable. Some of those garments were health hazards. The dyes, for instance. Brilliant greens came from arsenic compounds. Yes, poison. Imagine twirling around in your new emerald dress and wondering why you're dizzy. Historians still debate how many people were harmed by those dyes, but enough children developed mysterious rashes that the rumor of the deadly dress spread across London parlors. You, meanwhile, make your own fashion statements. You roll up your sleeves, tuck your trousers into your boots, and tie your hair back with a piece of twine. It's not that you don't care about appearances. It's just that survival looks better on you than silk. Every so often, you pass a tailor's shop and watch through the glass as he measures a young gentleman's shoulders. You wonder what it feels like to have a coat that fits exactly. The tailor's hands are quick and sure, the chalk marks precise. You imagine yourself there for a moment, arms outstretched, being shaped into something dignified. Then the image fades. You've got errands to run, soot to sweep, maybe a shirt to wash before bed. Washing clothes, by the way, is its own ordeal. It's a full-day ritual involving boiling water, soap flakes, and the kind of scrubbing that makes your knuckles raw. The smell of lye clings to your skin for hours. When it's done, the clothes are cleaner, but not exactly soft. If you hang them near the fire, they dry into stiff sculptures of themselves. You'll wear them anyway. And then there's the weather. Rain seeps through thin cloth. Snow stiffens your fingers until the buttons feel impossible. You've learned tricks to stay warm. Stuffing newspaper into sleeves, layering undergarments, even standing near chimney vents in the alleys where heat escapes. You and your friends call it the poor man's fireplace. In summer, everything reverses. The same layers that protect you in winter become torture under the sun. Sweat darkens the wool, collars stick to your neck, and the air smells like every other human wearing the same problem. You might envy those street urchins who strip to their undershirts to cool off, until you remember how your mother would react if you tried it. Still, there's something quietly heroic in these outfits. They mark you as part of your time, your city, your struggle. Every patch and pin tells a story. That rip on your sleeve? A reminder of the day you slipped climbing a coal cart. The stain near your hem? Left by a burst ink bottle during Sunday school. One quirky little fashion fad from your era deserves a mention: the sailor suit. Prince Albert introduced it for his son in the 1840s, and suddenly every family wanted their boy to look like a miniature naval officer. Even poorer families imitated it, sewing blue trim onto cheap shirts, hoping to borrow a touch of royal glamour. For once, fashion trickled down instead of up. You've seen a few of those sailor collars on the street, creased, grimy, but worn proudly. It's proof that even poverty has style when you wear it with enough confidence. At night, when you peel off your clothes and hang them by the bed, you sometimes imagine they have their own secret life. The boots sigh with relief, the shirt slumps in exhaustion, the trousers whisper gossip from the day's adventures. You fall asleep listening, half laughing at the thought. Historians still argue whether Victorian clothing was oppressive or simply inevitable, a mirror of a society obsessed with appearances. Either way, you've learned how to make it your armor. Scratchy, patched, and occasionally toxic, yes, but armor all the same. Tomorrow, you'll lace up those boots again, tug the frayed cuffs into place, and face the world dressed not for show, but for survival. And somehow, despite everything, you'll look just right. You wake before dawn to the smell of something thin and burnt trying to be breakfast. There's porridge on the stove, if you can call it that. It's more gray than golden, and you can count the oats in it one by one. Still, you're hungry enough not to care. You scoop a spoonful, blow on it, and let the heat settle your stomach. Food in the Victorian world isn't about flavor. It's about fuel. Calories before comfort. The morning meal, if you're working class, might be bread crusts dipped in weak tea or a sliver of cheese shared among 3 people. Sugar, when you get it, feels like a miracle. Today's portion tastes faintly of soot because the chimney above the stove is always coughing. You joke that you're getting your daily dose of coal early. Your mother smirks, but doesn't laugh. She's already thinking about dinner, which might just be leftovers from last week's soup. Historians still argue whether working-class diets improved during the Industrial Revolution. Some claim the rise of cheap grain and tinned food meant more access to sustenance. Others say adulteration, the art of adding nasty fillers to everything, made things worse. And when you're the one eating, the debate doesn't matter. You know what it's like to bite into bread bulked with plaster dust or sip milk that tastes a bit too metallic. At least the smell of bakeries makes you forget for a second. Every morning, warm air drifts from those golden doorways, thick with the scent of fresh loaves. You sometimes linger near one, pretending you're choosing which to buy, when really, you're just feeding on the smell. By noon, you're back at work or school, if you're lucky enough to attend, and lunch is a pocket affair. Maybe a cold potato, maybe nothing. Sometimes you trade bites with friends, 1 apple wedge for 2 crumbs of pudding. You never waste a thing. Even the peel of a fruit becomes candy if you suck on it long enough. The rich, of course, dine differently. You've seen them through windows, tables glowing with candles, silver spoons, roast meats shining with glaze. Victorian cuisine at its finest was an endless parade of courses. Soups, pies, puddings, and delicate sandwiches with the crusts neatly trimmed. Somewhere between the fancy cookbooks and the penny pamphlets on how to feed your family of 6 for 2pence, the truth about food got split in 2. One curious detail you might like: Victorian street vendors sold nearly everything edible on a stick. Hot eels, baked potatoes, roasted chestnuts, sugared nuts, even oysters. Street food wasn't a novelty. It was survival wrapped in greaseproof paper. You could eat dinner standing up, right there in the fog. You remember the eel men especially, their carts hissing with steam, their voices calling hot eels. Pepper 'em yourself. You'd stand close to the warmth, watching the broth bubble, pretending you had the penny it cost. Sometimes a kind soul would hand you a piece of bread dipped in the spice sauce. For that one bite, you were royalty. Historians still debate whether the Victorian diet caused more illness than it cured. Malnutrition was everywhere, yet so was overeating, among the wealthy at least. The age of empire meant sugar, tea, and spices poured into Britain from every direction, turning simple meals into symbols of global power. Tea especially, served in fine china for the rich, enamel mugs for the poor, became the great equalizer. Everyone drank it, but not everyone could afford the sugar to make it sweet. Dinner time in your world is less ceremony, more logistics. If there's meat, it's probably stew, stretched with turnips and carrots. If not, it's soup with barley and imagination. You might eat from a shared bowl, spoons clinking in rhythm. Conversation is short because everyone's too tired. And yet, somehow, meals have meaning. Even a crust of bread feels different when shared. You've seen your mother set aside the last slice for your younger brother, pretending she isn't hungry. You've done the same yourself, that you tell him you're just saving room for pudding, a pudding that never arrives. On rare occasions, though, you taste joy. Fair days bring gingerbread men, crisp at the edges, soft in the middle. Holidays mean mince pies, so sweet they almost ache. You remember the first time you had one. You licked the sugar off your fingers until there was nothing left. That taste, that memory, was proof that life wasn't all grit. Then there's Sunday. Even the poorest families try for something special. Maybe a roast chicken shared among 10. Maybe a meat pie if you're lucky. Everyone sits straighter at the table, like eating together means something bigger. And it does. It means belonging, however temporary. Victorian cookbooks promised efficiency and virtue. Waste not, want not, they preached. Housewives learned how to reuse everything. Stale bread for pudding, old bones for broth, yesterday's porridge fried into tomorrow's breakfast. Nothing went to waste except the hunger itself, which lingered like an uninvited guest. And yet, even hunger had its strange humor. You once told your friend Charlie that your stomach growled so loud it could be hired as a street vendor's cry. He replied that his was quieter because it had given up. You both laughed because what else could you do? Later that night, as you lie in bed, you think of all the smells drifting through the city, the tanneries, the smoke, and somewhere the faint perfume of baked bread. You imagine eating your fill just once. Not fancy dishes, not royal banquets, just enough. Historians still argue whether food scarcity made Victorian children more resilient. Maybe it did. Or maybe it just taught them to dream harder. Either